Many years ago, decades ago actually, I got a really interesting project with the U.S. Agency for International Development. This was on a project to build a water supply system in El Fayoum, Egypt, which is a rural city about 100 miles south of Cairo. The project was managed by James Montgomery Corporation, which was a large civil engineering firm at that time based in Pasadena, California. And my job was to implement a engineering document management system for them. That included setting up the computer systems from scratch. They were shipped there in boxes, so I had to do pretty much everything. Configuring the software, getting the workflow procedures set up, and even training the staff. This was not only my first international gig, it was the first time I had been overseas at all. So for me, it was a really exciting project, and it went really well. I got the system up and running so successfully and early that they gave me other assignments like setting up a currency management system for their office, which involved easily converting back and forth between different currencies, mostly the US dollar and the Egyptian pound. My boss there was a great guy, and he wanted for the project not only to be a success, of course, but he also wanted it to be a good experience for me. So we did all sorts of interesting day trips with he and his wife and sometimes other employees around the local area, around Al Fayoum. Then, just before a long 3-day weekend, some Egyptian holiday, he said, "Hey, Rob, why don't you take my car and drive and go to Cairo for a few days and have a good time?" And so I did. I spent the weekend sightseeing and partying in Cairo with an expense account and a car and driver. I did have one official duty. I had to pick somebody up at the airport on one of the days, but I still managed to cram a lot into that weekend. And one of the really weird memories I have is when I saw the step pyramids of Saqqara, I actually got stuck in an underground tomb during a power failure. And this was not a small tomb. I mean, I was way down there. There were little strings of light bulbs on the roof, but that was it. And there was a power failure, and it was complete darkness. And if you have never been stuck in an underground tomb in Egypt during a power failure, let me tell you, your imagination can run pretty wild. Most of the trip was a lot less scary, though. Here's a picture of the Great Pyramids at Gaza with the Sphinx in the foreground. And that guy you see, the skinny young guy with the blue shirt, the brown hair, that's me, or that was me when I was maybe 30 years old, maybe even a little bit younger than that. As an aside, I remember being in the hotel bar while I was there, and I struck up a conversation with one of the locals who was sitting next to me also drinking. And for some reason, the conversation turned to religion, which is not necessarily a good idea there, especially since I was kind of indirectly representing the U.S. Agency for International Development, and even more indirectly representing America itself. And I got curious because he seemed to be a devout Muslim. And at one point in the conversations, I just couldn't help but ask. He said, "Hey, I thought Muslims didn't drink." He gave me the best answer to that question that I think I'd ever heard for almost any question that I've ever asked anybody in my entire life. He said, "This Muslim does." Well, that point made. That ended the conversation. Point made in a really excellent way. Anyway, I was on this project for about 4 months, I believe. And during that time, I got into some great conversations with the project director there, who was my boss. And he had been just about everywhere in the world. He was an absolute natural at being an expatriate, and he had some absolutely amazing stories. One that I remember, though, is we were talking about America and what he liked about America. And he said his favorite thing about America, the thing he missed most, was American coffee shops. He said he loved the fact that when your cup of coffee was half empty, some waitress, they're called servers now, I don't want to be politically incorrect, some server would come along and fill it up right away. And that just doesn't really exist elsewhere in the world, and he just loved that. He also told me that when one of his projects finished, he always loved going back to Pasadena in the United States. And for the first several months of that, he would be almost euphoric to be home, to have all the American comforts that we forget until we go to a developing world country. But he said after a few months, a discontent slowly settles into him, or just a restlessness. And he said that one thing he just couldn't relate to at all, he tries to strike up conversations with his neighbors to be friends with them. He goes, all they want to talk about is their lawns, their lawn care. And he just can't relate. And after a while, he is just chomping at the bit to get overseas again and begging his boss and his company to send him on an overseas assignment. So we used to get in these great intellectual discussions, sometimes late at night. And during one of them, he told me what he thought the primary problem with capitalism was. And he said it so succinctly that I really want to share it here. He said that why capitalism undoubtedly does some great things. It supplies goods and services. It provides an incentive for work. It fosters innovation and many other things. It drives our economic system, or it is our economic system for the most part. But he said that it has one problem. It doesn't capture the cost side of the equation correctly. If you're looking at profit and costs in accounting terms, it tracks profits and rewards for profits very well, but not costs. He gave a really simple example to illustrate this idea. Suppose a man cuts down a tree in the rainforest. He profits from that, from his hard work from doing that, from finding the tree and cutting it down. He gets to sell the hardwood and probably profits very well from that. But he didn't pay the cost side of that equation. He didn't pay for the cost to the forest, to the ecosystem, to the planet itself. Capitalism does a lousy job of accounting for the true costs of actions taken in a capitalistic system, and we know the devastating results of this. Unfortunately, some people seem to think this is business, that instead of emphasizing the good parts of capitalism, of our capitalistic system, of the hard work, the innovation, and providing good services to your customers, they look for opportunities to exploit that cost side of the equation. I want to emphasize that it's not just business that does this, it's also government. And in fact, I think they have a bigger problem with it because it's not even in their worldview. They don't even consider it. So what does the government exploit? What do they steal? I can give an example from personal experience from the government-funded community clinic I went to, Family Healthcare Centers of San Diego. The resource they exploit is not physical. It's not hardwood trees in the rainforest. It's temporal. It's time. They leverage and steal people's time. Time from the people who can afford to waste time the least. People will go on bus trips across town, 3-4 hours, only to be told you're 1 minute late. You have to come back another day. Absolutely devastating. You can read some of their comments and reviews that people write about them. They're practically broken as humans. Sometimes they'll have to, for some minor thing, they will have to spend days to get medical care. And with mental health, it's even worse. A lot of people say in the healthcare industry in general, they waste time, they complain about time, but that can reach a level where it's no longer just wasting time, and saying wasting time doesn't really capture the gravity of the situation. They're not just wasting time. They're exploiting it. They're stealing time. And that's what we need to start calling it. It is the theft of time. They get paid every second of time they waste for you. It is the exact same thing as cutting down trees in the rainforest. Time is one of the only non-renewable resources. Once it's used, you don't get it back. Now that I'm recently turned 70 years old, I'm more aware of that. There's probably no getting around having your time wasted in the healthcare business, or especially in mental health. But at some point, if it crosses the line between just wasting time and leveraging time, when it becomes part of their business model, as it seems to have happened in government-funded healthcare systems, Medi-Cal, government-funded mental health, certainly community clinics. When it becomes part of their business model to waste people's time, let's not call that wasting time anymore. They're stealing time. They are thieves. In the evaluations we do of government programs, we need to do a much better job of tracking and understanding failure. They're not doing that now. In fact, in many cases, they're just assuming success and not even counting their failures at all. The failures just get flushed down the toilet, they're ignored, and they brag to the government only about the successes that they have made. Many of the failures never even make it to the data. They're cut off at the pass. Nobody even knows about them. But they are many. And we also need to do a much better job of capturing the true cost to everybody. If you have a government program, help some people maybe, but it wastes or steals the time from hundreds or even thousands of people. Is that really a successful government program? We need to capture the full cost of these programs. I did a proposal to UC San Diego Health, the group that is in theory now my healthcare provider. A lot of problems with that. I submitted a California public records request, also called in other parts of the country, it's called a Freedom of Information request. It was rejected in total. Information they almost certainly had, they just rejected it because they simply don't want to look at it this way. With UC San Diego Health, for example, specifically their psychiatric department and their mental health programs, there is no doubt at all in my mind that as a delivery platform, it has failed. It has failed massively. I waited 2 full months to get an appointment with a psychiatrist there. I wanted to get my successful ADHD treatment restored with the medications, and the absolutely arrogant psychiatrist I met there, who had an over-the-top sense of entitlement. After waiting 2 months, he gave me a work assignment, psychological testing, that would have taken months more and cost thousands of dollars, which I didn't have. They were just getting rid of me. It's easy because they don't have to count their failures. Nobody cares about their failures in government. We need to study failure. I think the best way to do that is to start out by saying, this is a failure study. There's a proud tradition for that. I was raised a Catholic. They have what's called a devil's advocate program, where if you're going to anoint somebody a saint or whatever the word for that is, they look for everything wrong with that person. That exists. That's probably not a good example. The airlines, one little problem, they will analyze it. Other industries do not accept failure. And if there is a failure, they want to understand it totally. In mental health, they don't care about that. They've convinced everybody they're doing so much awesome good that they don't need to look at their failures. But what if, on balance, they were doing more damage than good? And I think that might be the case. There's enough of a possibility of that I think we seriously need to look at it. I intend to make another video shortly about why I think it's so important to cover failure, to study failure, and to even assume failure. But the point I want to make here is that both our economic system, the capitalist system, and our government are not accounting for the true cost of their activities. They're cutting down trees in the rainforest, and nobody's paying for it, and nobody's held accountable. Thank you for watching this video, and thank you for your attention.